Hey everyone, it's Reese here, and you join me again for another reaction video. I was sent an article by a friend of mine, thank you very much to Amanda, the worst movie trilogies ranked, with a view that apparently there was something on this list that I'm going to find upsetting or confusing, is what I've been advised. As with all these reaction things, I have not looked at this yet. I do not know what's on this list, other than sort of what the picture on the top is implying. There's a piece by Jeremy Urquhart. This is on Collider, and I've linked the article down below. Um, so, um, Look at this. Hard to make a good movie, and actually sometimes it's three times harder to make three good ones. Um, so what they're doing there is saying that it might be the case that some of these trilogies are terrible. In some cases, it might be the case that two movies are let down by one really bad one, thus ruining some of the other trilogies. And they're saying some of the good found in the first two, implying that in all cases it is the third film that lets a trilogy down. Um, this will be interesting. I'll react to each pick. We'll see what the justification by the author is, and we will go from there. So we all saw number 10 already. We're scrolling down. So the Blade trilogy. Um, Now I don't know that I have seen all three of the Blade films in truth. And rather handily. And the one I haven't seen is the one that is cited here as the trilogy killer, Blade Trinity. Is that the one with Ryan Reynolds in? I'm not 100% sure. But I always thought Blade was really cool. Blade is really fun. And yeah, Wesley Snipes is such a presence in these films. I really like them. And sort of, these are enjoyable films. They're sort of slocky, sort of action horror hybrids, and I quite like them. I'm loving the sort of the brutal review of the third one, a tedious and miserable watch. That's not one for the poster, is it? Um, but yes, no, I sort of like the Blade character, and I love Blade character enough. There's a mention there of Wesley Snipes' reappearance in Deadpool and Wolverine, which was a hell of a surprise for me. I gotta be honest, one I greatly enjoyed. Yeah, no, this is hard for me to judge because I have not seen Blade Trinity, and it's Blade Trinity here that is the sort of film that's really getting the critique here. But I like the first two Blade films, and it seems there's lots of admiration for them in this piece too. Skip ahead to number 9. So the article header, the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Yeah, it's three films, and these are weird. And this is sort of where the controversy starts to fly. And this is the point where I throw out the caveat I should have thrown out at the start about these very much being my opinions. And yes, went to see The Force Awakens when it came out as a Star Wars fan and got very, very excited and greatly enjoyed it. And it was a wonderful time. I know it's sort of essentially a massive rehash of A New Hope, but nonetheless, it's good fun. It sort of sets up interesting things. Kills off a character that is sort of a bizarre choice to kill off, but there we go. Then The Last Jedi. It's yeah, I went to watch it with my then partner at the time. We watched it at midnight, and like the moment it came out, and just left so disappointed, so confused, with no real excitement for seeing what was coming next. I don't recall really ever having walked out of the cinema and just felt so sort of underwhelmed by sort of all the nonsense of it. And the Laura Dern character that we're meant to think is sort of this heroic leader, despite the fact all of her decisions are bad ones. The sort of ludicrous low speed chase. The fact of oh, I forget the name, the what's it, Rose Tico. Um they go on this ludicrous casino chase, and she releases one animal and then says, "Now it's worth it." All this nonsense, and then the Rise of Skywalker, a film that I didn't see in cinemas, a film that I caught sort of on streaming, sort of many years later. I'm just so bored with, um, it's just so many sort of pieces wielded together. It's such a yeah. I remember the goodwill of The Force Awakens, and although people sort of noted that it was in many senses a carbon copy, I remember the goodwill and the excitement and the way that the Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker just completely eroded that and really set Star Wars on a sort of decline from which it's not recovered. And it's hard to imagine, really, that Star Wars could have got worse since these things. But things like the Acolyte, things like the Obi-Wan series, I haven't seen Andor. Apparently, it's good. Um, Yeah, I can rate this one being a bad trilogy. Um, I must say I was pleased with the author's little cowardice of not saying for which reason he's chosen it. Let's go back to number eight. What is it? The Ant-Man films. Um, yeah, the Ant-Man films. It is, as it says here, the fact that the third film is really the one that really lets it down. The film is boring. Um, a film that I quite like the first Ant-Man. I find it a nice little change of pace. There's a scene where they have the sort of the fight in the bedroom where they're fighting on the Thomas the Tank Engine train tracks and stuff, where I thought was really good fun. I liked the Michael Douglas. I liked the Evangeline Lily Carr part. I liked Paul Rudd as the lead. I mean, how can we not like Paul Rudd? Um, the second one, a little bland, but fair enough. Quantumania is such a bizarre, baffling, boring film. Um, and there are issues, and not least of which, as the author of this piece cites, that it essentially sets up Kang as this big villain, and then we all know what happened there. Um, but also the fact that it sets him as this monstrous threat, and then he's easily defeated by Ant-Man in this film. It's sort of you're not going to be scared of this. The fact that a lot of the film sort of sees Scott berated and sort of mocked by his daughter for not doing enough, despite the fact he's helped save the world multiple times. Um, yeah, these are just sort of meh films. As I say, I quite like the first Ant-Man. Superhero fatigue is very, very much set in as this trilogy has gone on. And the freshness of the first Ant-Man. I mean, a film that made us feel sad when an ant was killed, for goodness sake, um, devolved into sort of quantum nonsense. And I can support this. It wasn't one of the worst trilogies ever, who knows, but it's not a great selection of three films. Number seven, the Tron films. I've not seen any of the Tron films. Tron was never really something that appealed to me. Um, of course, I know the sort of drama of Tron Ares coming out last year and apparently being one of the most boring, baffling experiences with Jared Leto in the lead role. How does he keep getting work? He never seems to turn in a good performance now. It seems like Dallas Buyers Club was essentially sort of the high point, and since then just decline after decline. Um, I cannot comment on the Tron films as I've not seen any of them. Um, so I will skip ahead to the next entry on the list. Hanzo the Razor. Um, Again, another selection that I can't really speak to. Um, these are not films that I know, in truth. Three intense and highly uncomfortable samurai movies about a law enforcer who goes around enacting justice in ways he sees fit. Um, yeah, this doesn't sound particularly enjoyable. These are films from the 70s, according to this, so 50-year-old films. And the point of this, um, according to the article, is sort of their exploitation films that don't sort of do it in a good way, that are sort of iffy even for exploitation films. Haven't seen any of these films, I don't know them, but if that's the truth, then I can vibe with that as a reason, but I'll pass no comment. The Hangover films. Um, yeah, so The Hangover. Um, a baffling thing of here's a comedy that was incredibly successful, um, and so effectively lent itself to a one-off. Um, but it made loads of money, and so sequels had to happen. This is sort of the issue of Hollywood, right? Is that sort of it's very hard to get things that are allowed to be one-offs anymore. I think it's something like The Black Phone came out a few years ago, and we had the release last year um, of the sequel. But this is a film that so obviously was meant to be a one-off, and although I like a lot of these films, sequels are not often the way to do it, and this is why we have such one of the reasons we have such a sort of a dearth of new interesting works. Um, so yes, a weird bunch of films. And so the first one is incredibly good, incredibly funny comedy. Um, the second one is essentially the same film, really. And then the third one is a weird one that sort of introduces this sort of a larger dimension as to why this weird stuff keeps happening, and that confused a lot of people. And it yeah, this is the Hangover trilogy is very much a sort of trying to recapture lightning in a bottle and set of films. Um, And I would say, watch the first one and forget the fact that other ones exist, and there's no need for them. And meet the parents, um, and we say this. Um, Yeah, I say this, so talking about a trilogy. It was going to be ahead of me that the a fourth one is coming. But yes, the Meet the Parents films are again the sort of comedies, and the original Meet the Parents came out in 2000, and it doesn't really feel like the sort of comedy that gets made anymore. Um, it's a sort of a wonderful sort of edgy play to Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro as a son and father-in-law. I think it was Terry Garr or Terry Polo is his partner in that film. Um, and it's really good fun. The original Meet the Parents is really funny. I'd very, very much enjoy. The second one, Meet the Fockers, is again kind of treading the same ground, but it's fun enough if you like the first one. Little Fockers, which I think brought in Billy Crystal and as a grandpa figure, if I remember right, um, was not overly brilliant. I may be completely wrong about Billy Crystal, but I'm sure that's in my mind. Um, but yeah, this is again law of diminishing returns with comedy, as is often the way. But I think the first one genuinely still is really a really really funny comedy, and it has a sort of a sweetness and a bite that doesn't really exist in comedies anymore. Um, say this won't be a trilogy too long, as there's this new film Focker and all coming out. Um, yeah, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. Will it fall into the trap of comedies as they are now, or will it recapture some of the original magic? I do not know. The Hobbit films. Um, so as I've been slated for, um, I've been slated by my relatives, by friends, in the film world, and I have never seen any of the Lord of the Rings films. Um, Nor have I seen any of these Hobbit films, anything like that. I don't like fantasy. I really, really don't. And the idea of films being sort of 4 hours long and then there are extended versions, it feels to me incredibly self-indulgent. Anyway, um, the films are on my 1001 film list, which I talked about in a previous video, and so I will have to watch them. I will not, I suspect, be watching the Hobbit films. Um, and what I remember is a lot of it was sort of the bizarre choice of so these Lord of the Rings films come from quite sort of a thick tome in which there is more than enough content and material to make three films. Indeed, to make sort of three films and all the sort of extended bits and pieces that get you to you know 14, 16 hours worth of content. But The Hobbit is like a tiny book. It's like a kid's book that doesn't really have any depth. And apparently there was not really sufficient material even to make it to one. So having stretched itself out to three, it's a bit of a bizarre choice that I don't really get the logic for other than money, 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 money. Um, as is the way. Um, yeah. I haven't seen these films again, but I know the sort of there's around them is just that there's not the material to sort of do anything with. That they might have worked as one film, um, but as three it feels like a stretch. I mean, you can see from the article here, films two and three are where things start to feel agonisingly drawn out and ultimately unsatisfying. I haven't seen these films, but as I understand, that is very much the prevailing wisdom. Is this is a trilogy that should not have existed, other than for money's sake. The Kissing Booth. So these were streaming films, weren't they? Or have I made that up? Um, yeah. So these were sort of films that went viral, right? Yes, in sort of around the sort of the COVID era. Um, and I remember them sort of lighting up social media with just clips of sort of poor acting, with clips of sort of bizarre reactions to stuff. And from what again, I've not really seen. I think I've seen sort of half of the first one, um, but from what I remember, they're sort of naff, sort of teen romancy films. Um, Again, there's a time and place for those. I don't mind them, um, but these are sort of yeah. I'm sort of reading the piece here. In every other regard, it's non-stop bad, other than the fact that Jacob Elordi is in them. I don't really have sufficient knowledge to comment on these either. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a poor reaction video. What does number one take us to? The Godzilla anime trilogy. Um, I mean, ranking Godzilla in terms of a trilogy feels to me a sort of a bizarre choice when there is how many films are there of Godzilla? There's like tons of them, isn't there? This is sort of talking about a selection of anime films that are supposedly meant to be a trilogy. Um, but the brutal review, if it's not for Godzilla in 1998, this trilogy was the weakest Godzilla-related thing out there. I think that's a stretch. And in a sense that, again, I know Godzilla is like this ultimate thing, but many of those films don't hold up particularly well. And Godzilla's cultural reputation, in my view, sort of carries and sort of glosses over the fact that a lot of these Godzilla works don't really hold up that well. Um, and many of the criticisms here, characters being boring, sort of repetition and sort of anticlimactic action, I think that's vaguely true of a lot of Godzilla. And it feels to me a bit of an easy out um, to criticise a trilogy for sort of really sort of encapsulating something that's true of a wider selection of films anyway. Um, but there we go. Is this Godzilla anime trilogy the worst trilogy ever? Probably not. Probably very much an audience for it. Um, who am I to comment? Sort of each individual person's tastes and rankings and all that sort of stuff are very much their own thing. Um, so I'm going to pass no comment there. Interesting to see sort of two sort of Japanese trilogies on the list as well, and that's quite nice. I mean, if you're sort of branching out to foreign films, so talking, my background is French cinema, and there are some sort of dreadful comedy series, that I've seen there. Are they all trilogies? The Qu'est-ce que fait un bon Dieu, or sort of things like that, sort of marriage comedies. Um, they're other trilogies. I mean, based on the logic of the article, I was expecting, things like The Godfather, because sort of number three is always sort of derided and slated as an example of a sort of a massive anticlimax. I would think. What other sort of stuff would I think of? um, yeah, I don't know if I know. This is sort of a hard question because there is a sort of a major difference between trilogies that are bad, i.e., films one, two, three are bad, and trilogies where sort of two parts are excellent, and then they're sort of sandwiched in with a poor part that sort of is so egregiously bad that it almost kind of um, collapses the entire help me out, brain, collapses the entire um, sort of quality of the trilogy as a whole. And because if you're talking like that, I mean, sort of you might talk about something like the Cars trilogy, where Cars 2 is always sort of really derided, and Cars 3. I really quite like Cars 3, but yeah, the option is there. Um, yeah, no, this is a surprising list. I'm not overly sure what was recommended here as sort of the thing that would really appall me. But I think yes, it's an interesting list, and that I can't speak to a lot of. I would. This is one thing that me thinking. Maybe something I'll have a look at down the line, sort of, in terms of sort of good and bad trilogies and trilogy rankings and that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, thank you to the author Jeremy Urquhart for sort of putting this together because there are some sort of really interesting things here. Do you have ideas for trilogies and um, trilogies and film series that you think are the things that should have been on this list that weren't? Are there examples of trilogies that are so much more painfully bad than the examples on this list? Alternatively, if you've seen the examples on the list and think they are underrated, unfairly represented, and they shouldn't be here, then please do comment below as well. I'd love to hear your picks. I'd love to hear about trilogies, and I'm going to have a wider think about some of the ones that I'm thinking of, and see if there's anything that I would put here, that shouldn't be here. But yeah, no, this is interesting. Thank you very much. If there are other videos, other articles, you would like me to react to, please do comment those below as well. I'm keen to see what you think I should be looking at. Well, thank you so much for watching this video, and make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to ring the bell so you know there are new videos. And thank you very much for watching, and I look forward hopefully to seeing you all